Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. We have an eminent lineup of speakers this morning, and so I will not be wrong in welcoming you to this ISIS Public Forum on an uneasy peace, China and divided world. First, let me apologize for our weather conditions and for the poor air quality. In fact, some schools and universities have been taken a break to wait for better air quality. Here at Chulalongkorn, we have taken some precautions, but continue with most of our academic activity. I am sorry if there has been misunderstanding for some who may have thought that this public forum would be postponed. We have eminent Chinese scholars visiting us and would not miss this opportunity to listen their viewpoints. And I have to especially thank to ISIS team that not postpone this forum. As we can see from international headline news, geopolitical and geoeconomic tensions have been on the rise. We are in the midst of the trade conflict between United States and China. This conflict appears to be escalating. The global media has offered plenty of news and views about the US-China contentious relationships. But sometimes this has been slanted. We simply do not hear enough and learn enough from what the Chinese think and feel. This is the background of our forum. I would like to thank the Devawongse Institute of Thailand's Ministry of Foreign Affairs and also to the ASEAN Peace and Reconciliation Council for co-hosting with us. The Thai Embassy in Beijing deserves credit for initiating the idea of organizing this seminar. I would like to also thank Dr.Surakiart Sathirathai, the APRC chairman and former foreign minister and former deputy prime minister, for kicking off with a Thai view of geopolitics and economics in views of China globalized and low. Similar thanks to Kun Arjaree Sriratanaban, the director of the Varoprakarn Institute, for her remarks shortly, and Kun Kavi Jongkitithawan as ISIS Senior Fellow for serving as a discussant. Finally, our huge thanks to Chinese colleagues and experts. Mr. Yang, I have to apologize if I pronounce not properly. Mr. Yan Xuetong, Dean of the Institute of International Relations, Tsinghua University, Secretary General of the World Peace Forum, Beijing, Professor Li Bin, Senior Fellow of the Carnegie-Tsinghua Center of the Global Policy, Director Li, Deputy Secretary General of the World Peace Forum, Beijing, and Associate Professor Chi Hai-Sia from Tsinghua University. Now, let me turn the floor to Ajahn Thitinan for what will be truly stimulating and constructive discussion for today's discussion. And thank you.
Good morning, His Excellency Dr.Surakiart Sathirathai, His Excellency Ambassador Piriya Khemphon, Thai Ambassador to the People's Republic of China, and Professor Yan Xuetong and Dr.Ake Tangsupvattana, ladies and gentlemen. It is my honor to join Dr.Ake in welcoming all of you to today's public forum, an uneasy peace, China in a divided world. On behalf of the Varoprakarn Institute of Foreign Affairs of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I must say that we are very pleased to be co-organize this event with the Asian Peace and Reconciliation Council and the Institute of Security and International Studies, Chulalongkorn University. And for me personally, it is also gratifying to be standing here speaking in the very building where I used to be sitting and studying years ago. And today we are privileged to have distinguished Professor Yan Xuetong along with Professor Li Bin, Professor Li, and Associate Professor Sriratanaban here to share their wisdom on critical issues under a thought-provoking topic. And of course, we are also privileged to have an opportunity after this to listen to Dr. Surakiart on his views on the topic as well. And of course, on my part, I wish to thank the Royal Thai Embassy in Beijing for inviting the 4 leading scholars from China to visit Thailand under the embassy's Friends of Thailand Visiting the Kingdom project. In so doing, this project by the embassy can help promote mutual understanding through academic exchanges. It can also contribute more broadly to enhancing people-to-people connectivity, which is not only a pillar underpinning the close relationship between Thailand and China, but also one of the major components of China's Belt and Road Initiative. On our part, the Devawongse Varoprakarn Institute of Foreign Affairs recognizes that academics play an important role in contributing to shaping of an informed foreign policy. One of our missions, therefore, is to promote academic exchanges and track to dialogue on strategic issues that have significant implications for foreign affairs and that would be beneficial to the public. And today's public forum is timely and its topic pertinent. We are now living in a crucial period. The international order is undergoing a major shift, and the single most consequential factor is the continuous rise of China. China's phenomenal growth and what has been flowing from there, from China's Belt and Road Initiative, China's large market to its high technology in various fields, space communication, artificial intelligence, clean energy, to name a few, are game changer and have opened up opportunities and new possibilities for trade, investment, economic development, and cooperation for this region, for ASEAN, and beyond. Positive developments notwithstanding, China's rise and its ramifications have caused misgivings and concerns. And one question arises: how will all this affect international order and regional architecture that continues to evolve? In this context, no issue perhaps is more critical and closely watched than the ongoing geopolitical and geoeconomic competition between the United States and China. And as its manifestation, we not only see a trade war, but we are also seeing a tech war as well. This very important relationship is indeed going through its restructuring. In his recent Foreign Affairs article, Professor Yan wrote of a bipolar US-Chinese order, one that will be shaped by fluid rather than opposing blocs. Then questions ensue and merit further debate. Has the US-China competition already led to a world divided, or will it? And if so, what about other powers? What would be their roles, and what about ASEAN? Or are we to expect, rather than a division, a form of complex engagement in which major powers seek not only to compete and contain, but also to cooperate, given the various challenges the world is facing? Finally, I'd like to add that under the theme of Thailand's ASEAN chairmanship this year, Advancing Partnership for Sustainability, we seek not only sustainable development, but also sustainable peace. This includes the issue of promoting an open and inclusive regional architecture that is based on mutual trust, mutual respect, and mutual benefit, and at the same time conducive to a rule-based and people-centered ASEAN Community Vision 2025. So I hope that the presentations and discussions during the course of this morning will help us enrich our ongoing discourse and efforts to address the various complex questions and challenges, including those I have already mentioned. So with that, I thank you very much and look forward to the discussion today. Thank you.
I have two short remarks before my opening remarks. First of all, I'm also always very happy to be back to this place, especially this particular room, because 40 years ago, it used to be the office of my mother, who was the Dean of the Faculty of Arts at Chulalongkorn University, where Ambassador Arjaree studied. And at that time, there were 3 rooms. It's a small reception room when you enter in. The second room is her office, and the third room is the meeting room of the Dean. And Chulalongkorn University has done a great job in renovating this room to be this beautiful seminar hall. So it's always a very important remembrance, nostalgia for me that I've been to this faculty. And my mother had been teaching at the faculty for 40, 50 years. She passed away 10 years ago, but that's the first remark. The second remark is that Ambassador Arjaree and I just learned today that we are really like-minded persons. I think she has taken 95% of my speech. In fact, I can finish by thanking her in saying things that I very much would like to say, but the difference is that I would end up my remarks by asking a lot of questions to our distinguished professors, including our expert of ASEAN and Asia, Kun Kawi. Excellency Ambassador Sriratanaban Khempon, the Thai Ambassador to the People's Republic of China, distinguished Professor Dr.Yan Xuetong, Dean of the Institute of International Relations at Tsinghua University and Secretary General of the World Peace Forum, Beijing, Associate Professor Dr.Ake Tangsupvattana, Dean of the Faculty of Political Science, Chulalongkorn University, Ambassador Arjaree Sriratanaban, Ambassador attached to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Thailand and the Dean of the Devawongse Varoprakarn Institute of Foreign Affairs, Associate Professor Dr. Thitinan Phongsuthirath, Director of ISIS, Thailand, Faculty of Political Science, Chulalongkorn University. We used to refer to your institute as ISIS, but I intended to call it ISIS for the better understanding and for peace sake. Distinguished professors from Tsinghua University and ladies and gentlemen, may I first of all, on behalf of Asian Peace and Reconciliation Council, or APRC, and all the organizers of today's Urban Forum, extend a very warm welcome to our visiting guests, the distinguished professor from Tsinghua University, led by Professor Dr. Yan Xuetong, Dean of the Institute of International Relations of Tsinghua and the Secretary General of World Peace Forum, Professor Li, Professor Li, and Associate Professor Shi Haixia. All of us who are co-hosting today's event feel indeed very privileged to organize this forum to hear the various views and thoughts on China from these distinguished Chinese academics at this very critical juncture of today's international relations. I think hardly any scholars and students in the Chinese studies and the Chinese affairs would not have heard or read the prolific writings and articles of Professor Yan Xuetong, who used to be listed among the world's top 100 public intellectuals by the American Journal of Foreign Affairs, as well as the most cited Chinese researchers. His keynote speech this morning will therefore both the highlight and of great interest to everyone in this room. Therefore, I will keep my opening remarks very brief. The international relations arena in the last few years, especially since 2017, when President Donald Trump assumed his presidency, may have called for closer appraisal of the role and how the world's superpowers are interacting. China's rise as the second largest economy in the world, an unprecedented Chinese global initiative known as the Belt and Road Initiative, or the Itai-Ilu, may have been seen as providing economic advantages to benefit the world's overall development. But no doubt, there are Chinese skeptics who naturally would look at this new chapter in Chinese affairs as potential threats to security and national interests. Since joining the WTO, China has proved that trade liberalization is the norm of their conduct of international trade. Yet, the events of the last 2 years have seen the different approaches to international trade between the world's number 1 and the world's number 2 biggest economies, leading to a clash of the two economic titans and the present predicament of the Sino-American trade war. Today, the world eagerly awaits the outcome of the China-US trade negotiation before the 1st of March. The Trumpism and the America First policy on the economic front, on international relations and security has made the Trump's United States positioning in the world arena different from any period in the post-Cold War. Indeed, intentionally or not, it has been even argued that it is the root cause of the new bipolarity of the 21st century, the US versus China in a new divided world. But looking closely at Chinese foreign and economic policy so far, I'm really and seriously doubtful if China also sees it that way, at least not in the sense of China-US global hegemony rivalry. Promoting and expanding trade and trade liberalization is definitely China's priority. It has been, it is, and it will continue to be so. China will continue to build more international markets. These new or expanded markets will render mutual benefits through the networks of infrastructure projects under the Belt and Road Initiative. China will concentrate on achieving further economic advancement through trade and technology to keep improving the livelihood of the 1.4 billion Chinese population. Therefore, in my view, the Chinese leadership would find no great benefit in any direct confrontation in the new divided bipolarity world. Ladies and gentlemen, let me now turn to the role of China in this region, and I have 6 observations to make. First, it is undeniable that thanks to the Belt and Road Initiative, China's role in Asian continent, in different Asian subcontinent groupings, such as ASEAN, in building and linking stronger regional cooperation in various parts of Asia, and China's role in linking the land, the sea, the air infrastructures in Asia are rapidly changing the economic development in this continent and beyond. The BRI is one of the major instruments in this regard. Nonetheless, the BRI, while rendering great benefits, inevitably faces challenges and criticism. On the BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative, I have these observations to make. The BRI projects expand beyond Asia to other continents of the world. Some 70 countries, 70, have agreed to some kind of the BRI projects. But many more are to come into the initiative. How could China win sympathy and support for the BRI from more countries, both within and beyond Asia, especially those who remain critical of this initiative? Then there is the issue of the stakeholders who are beneficiaries of the BRI. How could they become more involved and have better understanding of the BRI and to provide popular support for the Belt and Road Initiative? For the small people in the villages and towns who may tend to believe that big projects would deprive them of their traditional interests and the benefits they deserve, how can the BRI ensure that the initiative really benefit every sector in the economy? And finally, on the governments of the BRI countries, how can it be ensured that changes in governments in the BRI countries would not affect the BRI projects implemented by the previous governments in those countries? Second, my next observation is on China's role in this region to cope with the anti-globalization trend. In the region, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or the RCEP, or the RCEP, and the Free Trade Agreement of Asia and Pacific, FTAAP, or the FTAP, are the major 2 emerging regional trade and economic integration initiatives. How could the Chinese initiative and the Chinese leadership be the key to ensure that the BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative, the RCEP, the RCEP, comprising of 16 countries in Asia, and the FTA Free Trade Agreement of Asia and Pacific countries could help maintain the momentum of free and urban economy. Third, beside the so-called China-US trade war, the United States seemed to engage in another strategy that encompasses the South, the Southwest, East Asia, and Pacific countries into the Indo-Pacific region. This Indo-Pacific strategy may aim at countering the success of the BRI. In addition, the Quad Summit, the quadrilateral meeting on regional cooperation comprising the United States, Japan, India, and Australia, which had met only once in 2007, was revived and convened again 10 years later in November 2017 around the theme of a free and urban Indo-Pacific. A bit different views expressed in 4 separate statements, the Quad Summit of 2017 could be seen as a US strategy to assert counter-Chinese influence in the region, which the US calls Indo-Pacific, as opposed to the Asia-Pacific region. The term Indo-Pacific would lead to the United States' ability to expand its naval Pacific fleet to include the Indian Ocean. It would be interesting to understand the Chinese position towards this strategy. How would China tell her friends that the US strategy would not affect all the good initiatives of China? And what would happen if increasing number of countries in Asia were to lend support to this new strategy advocated by the United States and some other countries in the region? Fourth, also in a similar initiative, in 2016, Japan and India have conceptualized the Asia-Africa Growth Corridor, abbreviated as AAGC, which is a convergence of the free and urban Indo-Pacific and the Act East policy of the two countries. It would be interesting to hear from the panel later this morning how China regards such initiative, whether it serves as a complementary to the BRI or it serves as a competition, and whether it would affect the BRI projects. My fifth observation would be that I would be interested to hear the views from our distinguished guests on these issues of economic unipolar and bipolar world, as well as the shift from the multilateralism to unilateralism or to plurilateralism, as observed at the World Trade Organization and recently at the Davos World Economic Forum. I would be interested also to hear how China would handle the US trade and foreign policies so that the economies of the developing and the least developed nations, whose citizens' livelihood depends on healthy world trade and uninterrupted Sino-US trade relations, would not be affected. My last but not least observation is concerning the China-US technological race in the area of disruptive technology that Ambassador Arjaree has alluded to this morning. What would happen to the world where these two global economic giants are fiercely engaged to become the technological superpowers? Disruptive technology is borderless, as we all know, and increasingly becoming an important component of today's trade. What would be the shape of China-US trade deal, taking into account the role of disruptive technology? And with regard to the BRI, how could China bring countries in the region on board this train of advanced technology so that no one is left behind? Finally, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I wish to express my appreciation to Ambassador Piriya Kempon for the initiative to extend the invitation to our distinguished Chinese academics from Tsinghua University and the co-host, especially the ISIS and Associate Dr. Thitinan Pongsuthira, ISIS Director, to make this event possible and a success. Thank you very much for your attention.
The Dean, Ambassador Arjaree, and Professor Surakiart have set the stage very well for what comes next. I'm very pleased and honored to be amongst the Chinese scholars and experts. I have met Dr. Yan before at the World Peace Forum. You organized that very well. This is China's premier think tank, global think tank forum in Beijing. And the other scholars, I also met Dr.Li. So we have a lot of issues on the table. We have circulated the link to your article, Foreign Affairs article, which I've assigned to my students this term. It's a very good article. So let's do it this way. Let's start with Professor Yan. And Dr. Yan, you can speak as long as you like. Yeah, we have until about 11:30. And we'd like to have a bit of audience time, maybe half an hour for audience participation, questions and comments. A number of issues. We advertise this as sort of China, world order, world disorder. We have heard plenty of views from the US, from the West, and so on. And I always feel that we don't hear enough from Chinese perspectives. So perhaps you can give us a broad brush of where we stand in the world today. You know, the narrative is evident now. So there's a global unraveling. The international system is coming loose at the seams. The 7 decades old system from post-World War II, the Bretton Woods institutions and so on, they are not working anymore. And China's rise has made a lot of countries more anxious and so on. We have also the BRI and the FOIP. Do you see FOIP, Free and Open Indo-Pacific, as a pushback, as a containment against China's aspiration through the Belt and Road Initiative, and of course the trade conflict that we are seeing? You know, what would you say to that, and where do you think that's going? Of course, we also have other scholars who also touch on the Korean Peninsula, the gambit, the whole set. So Professor Yan, please, with you, we start.
Thank you, Chairman. And first, I want to express our sincere greetings to Ambassador Kiria Kanpan. And without his arrangement, and we cannot make this trip to this great country. And also, we thank the IS of the Chulalongkorn University to organize this activity and get so many distinguished guests to this seminar. Well, I noted that, and the organizer has already circulated my article in the Foreign Affairs, and I want to start it from the title, why I purposely selected the term "easy peace" for this article. Actually, during this process of submitting the article, I have a discussion with the editor, and I purposely select the term "use an easy peace," actually because there are too many talk about the Cold War, and since Kissinger said that, and the China-U.S. relationship can no longer turn back, and there's a lot of talk about what kind of result of the current competition between China and the U.S. will bring to the world. And so many people use the term Cold War to express or predict what will happen in next few years. And personally, I think this kind of prediction or analysis of China-U.S. rivalry and actually may not be true. And very possibly this time we will see a different competition and between the superpowers and from those we are familiar during the Cold War. That's why I select the term peace instead of the war to describe the situation. Well, and if I can give a very, very brief term to describe the fundamental difference between the competition between China and the U.S., with that between the U.S. and the Soviet Union is like this. And I think we're going to attend, to observe, to watch Thai boxing tomorrow, right? Well, seems to me, the Cold War is like a Thai boxing. And between the two boxers, and they try to knock down the other side, and if they want to win the game. But then the competition between China and the US is not like the boxing game, but boxing match, but try to like a soccer game. The soccer game is quite European, and it's certainly there's some brutal behavior on the competition, but mainly and based on the skills, how to get the ball into the gate. That means the goal is to win the competition by skills rather than by brutal forces. So I think this time this is the fundamental difference between the coming competition between China and the US with that between the Soviet Union and the US. So that also, I think just yesterday, we heard the very latest news. The American government formally sued the CFO of the Huawei company. And actually from the Chinese perspective, we believe this is an indicator of the serious competition on technology advantage between China and the US. So I think this situation will continue, and it's hardly to expect it. The delegation headed by Liu He, I think they are going to have a negotiation today and can achieve something we expected. Even they can get some kind of agreement, will be very temporary rather than very determinative, and cannot keep a durable stability between China and the US. Well, so the second thing is about what's the change of the world order. And when we're talking about the change of world order, and there's a kind of a confusion about what we are talking about. That means people have different definitions for the term world order. What do you mean world order? From my understanding, the order refers to a kind of a state of a stability or violence. So the most typical case is that if we have a peace, just the Dean said that, if we're looking for a sustainable peace, that means we can have a kind of a stable order. But if this kind of order disturbed by wars, by military violence, that means that there's no order, right? The order means a peaceful settlement of disputes according to international norms. We cannot prevent states have conflicts and because they have different interests. But then the key point is that how can we settle down these disputes over the interest of conflicts? So if we prefer or selected peaceful measures to settle down these disputes, and we refer that's the order. Actually, and the human being will have conflicts endlessly. You can never stop that, but then you can select the way to settle down the disputes. The other common approaches to settle down disputes is military force, military solution. And so that kind of measures will cause turmoil and undermine the peace. So that people regard that as the disorder instead of order. So here, from my understanding, the coming world will become also a kind of a bipolar world. It's China and the US represent two poles, and then the other countries are forced to select a sides. Obviously, no one like it. No country want to take sides between China and the US. But this time, from my understanding, the other countries do not vary that much, because this bipolar world will be very different from the bipolar world of the Cold War we're familiar with. This time, there's no two blocks based on the ideology. During the Cold War, and these two blocks and the members of the blocs have to unconditionally support the Soviet Union or the US based on the ideology. But this time, the core of the competition between China and US is not an ideology. It's not an ideological expansion, but it's a focus on the technology. So you find that China strongly resists on non-alliance principle. So make no alliance, that means organize no political groups. The US, at least we observe that Trump already distanced the US relationship with the traditional allies, including the Japan, South Korea, and the European NATO members. So that means we are going to see a kind of a deal like the European nobles. And the two countries against each other individually instead of organized two groups against each other. So this time, from my understanding, the rest of the world have more rooms to manipulate the situation rather than the Cold War. And because this time the difference is that the core of the competition is technology rather than the ideology, and the strategy adopted by both sides is to strengthen their national strengths or doing the research or the develop their economic base instead of go to the proxy war. So the situation will be very different. And first, the positive side, we do not need to worry about the competition that much as a Cold War. On the other hand, we have to prepare. There's a new type of competition, and we're not familiar. We don't know what it is. So a lot of things, especially in details, and we have to learn because they are so new. And nowadays, people talking about it. I just returned from the Davos. There, people talking about the AI, talking about 5G, and talking about the robots. All of these things, there's two kinds of fears. First, the fear about the leading powers control this technology so they can control the world. The second, they worry about the technology itself, it will control the world. And beyond the human beings' capability, they worry about this technology will beyond our human beings' control. So you know the Jack Ma, he even at Davos said that the AI 5G possibly brings about the Third World War. I'm not that pessimistic about the future, but then I just want to tell you, the fear is already growing. And all of the fears related to what? To the technical invention. And certainly, there's a worry about the competition between China and the US. The trade war prevailed on almost every panel at Davos about China and the US. The reason is that because this trade war have a negative impact on every country's order. If China and the US reduce their export to each other, meanwhile, they will reduce the order from the other countries. So this is an indirect impact on the other countries. Okay, so this is what we're going to see, and the new order will be. And my understanding is like this. This time, except what I said about the competition will focus on technology, and that will adopt the strategy to enlarge the market and doing the more research instead of the proxy war. There's another important difference. This is very cultural. This maybe very, very political. Is the world center is shifting from the Europe to East Asia. This is very, very different from before. And no matter World War I or World War II, the world center located in the Europe. Even these two wars didn't change that. The Europeans have been the center of the world for 200 years. And the power structure among the major states and didn't change this situation for a long time. And the European culture have the dominating influence over the world and spread from or proliferated from Europe to the rest of the world. But now this time is changing. And the EU, and from my understanding, their economy cannot grow as fast as East Asia. And the Europeans' influence will relatively decline. And you will find that at this moment, China, Japan, and South Korea, only these three countries put together, their GDP is already larger than the EU. And I have a number here, and China's and the US GDP last year is 20 trillion, and the EU is 18 trillion. And meanwhile, China, Japan, and South Korea put together is already 20 trillion, the similar like the United States. And if we plus the ASEAN have 2 trillion, so put together it's already much larger than the EU. This trend will continue. The gap will enlarge. So besides the GDP, if you look at the data of a military budget, the East Asian country spend more money on military modernization than the European countries. So in that way, you, for instance, I have the number like here. Last year, the global military budget is 1.67 trillion, and the US is 200 billion. And meanwhile, China, Japan, and South Korea, these three countries put together, is already 270 billion. That means this is already much larger than the Russia, Germany, France, and the UK. So let alone if you put on the ASEAN's military budget, it make the gap even larger. What I mean? I mean that because the East Asia as a whole and growing faster than the Europe, the world center will inevitably move toward the East Asia. It's good or bad, even for the East Asian countries. I'm not so sure. Why? Being the center of the world, it doesn't mean that it's good. Being the center of the world, it also means you're the core area compete by the superpowers. How can the European maintain the world center for so long time, for 2 decades? Because all of the major powers compete for Europe. During the Cold War, the Soviet Union and the US competed for the Europe. Now, the US have less interest in the Europe and develop more interest in East Asia. That also means, and the US will heavily focus on the competition in East Asia. This will intensify the conflict in this region. So being the center of the world on the one, it sounds it's a good thing. If you look at it in the detail, if you look at it in the history, you find that being the center of the world is always face the danger of the war, right? That's the danger. I do not predict that we are going to have war in this region. Seems to me this region at this moment relatively peaceful. And since 1991, the end of the war in the Cambodia, and this region have enjoyed peace for several decades. And even there's Korean's nuclear issues, and everyone knows that the North Korea as a country have never involved in the war since 1950. It's even longer than most of the other ASEAN countries, the East Asian countries, right? So what I mean this region already have a long-term peace. How much we can maintain the peace in the coming decades and facing the world center shift from the Europe to the East Asia, it's a new topic, it's a new issue, and it's a new thing for us to face with. The second thing I will say, what's the impact of the China-US competition on the world? I will say first about there's a global influence. Except the trade war already has a global impact on many countries. The second thing is the multipolarization or the globalization. And the globalization heavily rely on the multilateralism, rely on the multilateral diplomacy. And the multilateral diplomacy or the globalization and the rely on what? Rely on leadership. And after the Cold War, U.S. became the only superpower. So U.S. provided leadership for the world. So we see that we make a lot of achievements in many fields, including arms control. Professor Li Bin is going to talk about that. But now you find that U.S., especially Trump's administration, very firmly tell the world, U.S. has no interest to continue undertake that kind of leadership. U.S. do not want to undertake the leadership for globalization. Meanwhile, China still advocating the multipolarization, but I don't think China has the capability. China doesn't have that kind of resources to support this kind, to undertake the international leadership, the global leadership. So from my understanding, it's very possibly in next few years, we are going to face a world without global leadership. What does it mean? It means that when there's no global leadership, the regional powers will have more opportunity to play roles on regional affairs, on regional issues. So how can we maintain the sustainable peace in East Asia? And not only China and the US are very important, and the local powers, especially the local major powers like Japan and India, they're also very important, ASEAN. And because every region have a different power configuration, because every region have a different type of regional leading powers, so every region will be very different. So most pessimistic region, possibly the Middle East. Nowadays we see that U.S. is going to get a withdrawal from the Middle East, and China still have not made decision to get into that region, and the Russian may have that kind of motivation, but it is beyond their capability. So I think Russians still just keep their influence in Syria rather than beyond that country. Then what? Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Turkey will compete for regional influence. So these three countries will play more role for the regional order rather than the global superpowers. So this situation for Africa, Latin America, and Europe certainly rely on the German and the France, and from understanding, this is a new situation. So many people talking about the multipolarization. Well, at the regional level, it makes sense. If you talk every region are different, they rely on the regional powers, that means a multipolarization. But if you're talking about at the global level, I doubt we can use the term the multipolarization to describe the situation. And at the global level, the general trend, to me, is a bipolarization rather than the multipolarization. The third influence, just now, Your Excellency Surakiart said that we advocating and looking for the multilateralism. Unfortunately, because Trump's administration so strongly and prefer the unilateralism, I think stronger than the Junior Bush administration. So then we must not ignore the leading powers' role as a sample for the world. When the U.S. have the unilateral strategy to dealing everything bilaterally, and I doubt the other countries have the other choice. For instance, and NAFTA only have three members, and even three countries, Trump said, no, I do not want to have a multilateral dialogue. I will talk with Mexico first, and then I talk with Canada. It makes sense. For every bilateral negotiation, U.S. definitely have the superiority over the other side. So Trump feels confidence. Whenever I have the bilateral negotiation, I'm 100% sure I can control the situation. But for the multilateral dialogue, for the multilateral negotiation, U.S. may not have that kind of advantage. That's why the Trump administration do not want, Trump administration prefer the unilateralism. And then the question to the other countries, how can we do? Is there any country has the capability to organize the multilateral diplomacy opposing Americans? I doubt. It's beyond our capability. Then you find that most countries will say, okay, since the U.S. gave up multilateralism, we are weaker than U.S., how can we do? We certainly will follow that suit. We will also do the bilateral negotiation. So you see now there's a bilateral negotiation between China and the U.S. on the trade, and there's a bilateral talk between Japan and the EU. They are the reached free trade is a bilateral agreement, and the U.S. also talking bilaterally with South Korea, with Japan, with the EU, and China do that with the U.S., with Japan, with Russia, and now you see the bilateral diplomacy is gaining momentum. I do not mean which is good, which is bad, and it seems to me the trend is growing, and so I think this is a very, very very realistic, and I don't know whether we have any way to change the trend, but then the unilateralism is gaining momentum. The last, maybe not the least, the impact of China-U.S. competition, impact on the world is that the world will concern how can we protect the current international institution. U.S. at Davos, many people say, look at that, China's influence is increasing so fast, especially American participants. They said this is a kind of threat to the U.S. I said, wait a minute. And the increase of China's influence, partially because of China's own growth. The other part, I think is more important, is because the Trump administration's withdrawal from the international institutions, like UNESCO, like the Human Rights Committee, and like the Paris agreements on the climate change. U.S. have a strong impact on these global issues. When U.S. say, okay, I withdraw from these issues, China do not need to do anything more, and then China's influence increase. It's not because China do something, just because the U.S. didn't do something, right? So this situation will become that. When the U.S. started to abandon this international organization, what we can do? And I think every country should concern, do we consider to establish new global institutions? I don't know, but I want to read one thing for you. It's about what this State Secretary Pompeo said. And very recently, I think just on January 22nd, Pompeo said, truths like this, nations matter. No international body can stand up for a people as well as their own leaders can. Strong borders are key to strong nations. This is how we keep our people safe and protect our sovereignty. This is not the first time. Trump and Pompeo has re-emphasized the national sovereignty, the importance of national sovereignty. Emphasize Americans first is protecting Americans' sovereignty. And several times at UN, at Europe, at the Marshall Foundation, and so this already becomes American unchangeable policy. If the only superpower heavily focuses on sovereignty, what will happen? My feeling is that, and the border will be controlled more strict than before. Not only control the immigrants, they will control the flow of the capital, control the flow of the goods, control the flow of everything. And this trend is anti-globalization. And my understanding, this trend is already happened. And as long as the U.S., because the U.S. has that capability, U.S. is so strong, if U.S. take the leading role to oppose the globalization from my understanding, cannot move positively for any substantial achievements. And so this finally, I would say, and about the impact on the East Asia. East Asia or Southeast Asia, this region is different from the Northeast Asia, although East Asia as a whole. But Southeast Asia and Northeast Asia are very different. And the Northeast Asia being influenced by Russia, Southeast Asia, there's no influence of the Russia. And in Northeast Asia, there's no regional security infrastructure. But in Southeast Asia, there's ASEAN. So these two differences will make the Southeast Asia different from the Northeast Asia. First, from my understanding, the Southeast Asia is still possible to push forward the multilateralism because of the ASEAN. Northeast Asia is almost impossible. We have a 660 party talk on North Korea, and then it achieved nothing. And the current result or the current achievement based on what? Based on the bilateral diplomacy between the U.S. and South Korea, North Korea, China and North Korea, or China and the U.S. All of these negotiations through the bipolar diplomacy rather than multipolar diplomacy. Second, as in Southeast Asia, it's still possible to push forward for what? Free trade zone. Because 10+1 is there, 10+1 have already upgraded, and we can pull forward, and if we can get any, no matter the Australia or the South Korea to join this, and we still can pull forward. But in Northeast Asia, you don't have this opportunity in the next few years. There are, if they can achieve something, it's only bilateral free trade agreements rather than a multilateral. The last thing about the difference between the South Korea and North Korea is people in this region and worry about the South China Sea issue. Actually, okay, I'm going to write up. I have talked too long. And actually, this is the situation for South China Sea, my understanding, is cooling down. And in the Southeast Asia, and the South Korean's nuclear issue has already cooling down because of Trump's policy, and they are going to have a new summit very soon. And for Southeast Asia, you will find that the confrontation will shift from the maritime conflicts-related country to what? To the competition between China and the U.S. China and the U.S. competition over the South China Sea will replace the role, the importance of the regional conflicts. So the regional conflicts over the China Sea were cooling down, and then China and the U.S. competition in this region will become intensified. Well, I think I'm going to wrap up like this, and I gave you my personal view, and may not be very correct with the reality. I'm really looking for any questions and the challenging opinions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Yan.